The top 10 list you've all been waiting for. Well, it's been a really fun year and a half, but now that my channel has hit a 5-digit subscriber count, it's time I reward you guys with what has been a list that you guys have wanted for almost a year now. The second half of my top 10 best post-movie SpongeBob episodes. Now, I don't think I'm offending many people by saying that these seasons of SpongeBob are, well, the worst seasons of the show. But with that said, they weren't totally incapable of making good episodes. And since I've badmouthed these seasons so much in both of my worst SpongeBob episodes list, and since I'll be badmouthing them some more when I talk about the terrible specials of this show, it's time it got its due of praise for the episodes it got right. And just like my other lists, the same rules will apply. No specials will be included on this list, like Hello Bikini Bottom or Ghoul Fools for example. Well now, let's not waste any more time. It's time to count down the best SpongeBob episodes from season 6 through 8. Squidward in Clarinet Land. Now I feel this episode is a bit of a hit or miss episode. There's a good portion of people who aren't too fond of this episode, and I can kind of understand why. It's a pretty bizarre episode with little sense to it. It's basically a big drug high, and a random drug high at that, and it can feel like a bit of a Squidward torture porn. But in my opinion, this is one of the most creative and visually engaging episodes. Not just of these 3 seasons, but of all of SpongeBob. This episode is about Squidward wanting to keep his clarinet safe for a clarinet recital, and being given a locker that SpongeBob basically turns into the locker of Narnia.
Where am I?
And the rest of the episode is Squidward trying to find his clarinet in this bizarre as fuck world, and all these different things he comes across. And truth be told, this episode feels kind of like 1 + 1 = Ed from Ed, Edd n Eddy. It's just one of those episodes that you get so lost in that you just want to see where it goes. And yeah, while there are some questionable Squidward moments, to me, they aren't all that bad, and they don't take away from the amount of effort put into this episode. While it's a miss for some, it's a complete hit for me.
Must be all the pressure.
What are you talking about?
It must be the pressure.
Growth Spout. I think this is another episode that could be very hit or miss. But for me, this is kind of like Donut of Shame. It's one of those episodes that's such a breath of fresh air because it involves a terrible character, in this case Mr. Krabs, showing a genuine likable side to him. Now Mr. Krabs you can definitely argue to be the worst character of the entire show, along with, of course, Patrick. But in this episode, he's actually portrayed as a caring and compassionate father to Pearl. Well, as caring and compassionate as you would think Mr. Krabs could be. When Pearl starts going through a growth spurt, or as it's referred to here, a growth spout, Mr. Krabs tries to do everything in his power to help her get better, because this growth spout causes her a great deal of pain and to be very hungry. And the really interesting thing here is, at first, it actually does look like Mr. Krabs is going to be a terrible character yet again, because when Pearl starts her growth spout, he does this.
Pearl, this is terrible! I paid $30 for that bed!
But after Pearl says she needs food, he does this.
Okay, Pearl, I wasn't sure what to get, so I just brought the whole refrigerator.
He didn't even care that she ate the refrigerator. That doesn't sound like Mr. Krabs, does it? Also, give this episode props for throwing in some gross looking imagery, but making the gross imagery work well enough to show the pain Pearl is going through, yet not too over the top or prolonged enough to where it just grosses the viewer out. because it actually reinforces a lot how much Mr. Krabs really cares about her, because the rest of the episode consists of Mr. Krabs trying to find food for Pearl so he can end her pain and suffering.
Surely Patrick could spare a few morsels. After all, it's for a worthy cause. Me beloved Pearl.
Now to be fair, Mr. Krabs originally does this because Pearl threatens to eat his money if he doesn't, but in all honesty, that joke feels more like a clever metaphor about how much money teenagers eat away once they start growing. So in a way, it kind of works without making Mr. Krabs look as bad as he usually is. Actually, the whole episode, you really get the feeling Mr. Krabs isn't doing this just to save money. He is doing this because he really does love Pearl.
It's me dear daughter, Pearl.
Pearl, what happened?
She's going through one of them growth spurts, and I can't find a way to feed her.
Yeah, there are a few moments where Krabs seems like the generic Mr. Krabs he's always been, but it's still pretty downgraded and it's nowhere near as bad as what we've been used to all these years. Honestly, this episode is just a pleasant surprise to me. It really feels like this is one of those episodes where these new writers actually knew how to write one of their characters. And that alone makes this episode deserving of a spot. Moonkeishon. Okay, I'm gonna let you guys know an interesting fact about me. Now, the first SpongeBob episode I ever saw was the episode Sandy's Rocket. Yep, that was my introduction to the show, which has now become a staple of my childhood. So I think it's a big reason I also enjoy Moonkeishon, which was clearly somewhat inspired by Sandy's Rocket. This episode, which is the clear-cut best episode of these vacation episodes Season 8 was filled with, is about Sandy going to the moon for a vacation, and SpongeBob accidentally joining her and causing a lot of mishaps as a result.
A one-footed, tongue out, flip, leg out.
You did great, SpongeBob, but you should call your trick the one-footed, tongue out, flip, leg up, puncture the fuel tank on the rocket.
Now, while SpongeBob does a lot of damage in this episode, it all works because, well, one, it's all completely accidental, and it's clear SpongeBob feels bad whenever he does wrong. Like, for example, the reason SpongeBob accidentally joined Sandy on her Moonkeishon is because he was trying to get her a going-away cake. But he just so happened to join the rocket as it was taking off. So it wasn't because he chose not to listen to her, it was because he was trying to do something nice for her. And two, it results in a ton of really entertaining moments. For example, the cake SpongeBob brought ends up breaking apart and clogging the engine, which results in Sandy having to go out into space mid-flight to fix it. The humor in this episode is top-notch as well. There's a lot of great space jokes and a lot of creative space moments in this episode that really make this episode stand out as one of the best all-around episodes of Season 8. Definitely a must-watch if you want an entertaining post-movie SpongeBob episode.
Are we going to be consumed in a giant fireball?
Not if I can keep our nose up, we are!
Planet of the Jellyfish. Well, if an episode is able to be a great parody of a classic horror movie, it automatically gets high marks from me, as is the case with this episode being a great parody of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Now, what's amazing about this episode to me is that these characters seem like the perfect characters to make a parody of this about. The reason being, they are so incredibly batshit insane that when the jellyfish make their little duplicates, despite the characters acting a bit off, they still seem like similar characters to the originals.
Whoa!
Yes, I too have caught many jellyfish. Perhaps we should give one to each of our friends.
Wow!
Do not let the bed bugs bite.
And on top of that, the jokes in this episode are some of the best parody jokes this show's ever come up with. For example, when the jellyfish SpongeBob keeps tries to take him over, and SpongeBob does this.
Oh, hey, you want some popcorn? Here you go.
There are jokes like this all throughout this episode, and the climax of this episode is perfectly executed. This episode has everything a decent SpongeBob episode would need, and it's clear these writers know their horror classics, which makes them alright in my book. Also, for the record, these same three writers, along with Derek Iverson, wrote It's a SpongeBob Christmas. So this might be the best trio of writers in all of post-movie SpongeBob. Oh. Alright, well, credit where it's due. They made a great parody episode.
Actually, I want one with extra mail.
The Bad Guy Club for Villains. This is a fucking impressive episode. First of all, two of the writers of this episode have writing credits for some of the worst episodes in this show's history, including A Pal for Gary and One Course Meal to name a few. And all three of them wrote Enchanted Squarepants. But this episode, as well as another episode I'll be talking about later on in this video, shows a legitimate amount of skill from its writers, which I guess makes these episodes even more unforgivable. This episode is basically an entire episode of the Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy show, where Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy find out all their greatest enemies are getting together in secret, and come to the conclusion that they are forming a powerful team-up to take over Bikini Bottom.
It's worse than I could have imagined. A team-up!
Now, a Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy episode was something I always wanted to see as a kid. I mean, yeah, there were episodes where they played big roles, but I always wanted to see a show within a show kind of episode that just focused on these two characters, especially since they always showed snippets of what these episodes were like, and they always seemed really funny to me. And this episode did not disappoint me. The series always depicted the show as a parody of the Adam West Batman series, and this episode does a great job parodying that show, just like Planet of the Jellyfish did for Invasion of the Body Snatchers. But I put this one spot ahead of Planet of the Jellyfish for one very big reason. This episode is not only filled with many hilarious fighting scenes and a somewhat interesting and engaging storyline, it actually turns into a surprise PSA about reading.
Fess up, villains. What's the BGATFBC?
It stands for the Bad Guys All Together for Book Club.
Book Club?
That's some really clever writing skills right there, in my opinion. Not only did they give us an episode a lot of people wanted to see for years, but they made it a faithful parody to a classic superhero comedy and a really nice and well-executed PSA. I mean, that's fucking amazing to me that they pulled all of that off. And this is one episode that deserves a ton of appreciation, because it's one super episode.
Yeah! You can't imprison us for reading!
That's right. Remember, kids, no one can imprison you for reading.
Perfect chemistry. There's a reason perfect is in the title of this episode. It's one of the more perfect comedic episodes of the show. This episode is about Sandy and Plankton teaming up to work on Sandy's new transporter invention, and the way they make these two team up is very clever. When Plankton turns himself into gas to steal the Krabby Patty formula, he doesn't take into account all the issues with being gas. So when he gets to the Krusty Krab, Mr. Krabs blows him away and he ends up at Sandy's tree dome, where she's impressed that he was able to turn himself into gas. And when she asks Plankton to help her with her transporter, he decides to use it to help him get the Krabby Patty formula. So, despite Plankton being a bad guy, there's a legitimate reason for Sandy to want to team up with him, because his ability to turn himself into gas can actually be beneficial for her transporter.
I guess I never realized you were such a student of science. Maybe you could help me fix my nut transporter.
There are also some really good jokes here. I know a lot of people are aware of the nice use of fart jokes in this episode for a number of reasons. One, they actually managed to embarrass Squidward in a hilarious way, and two, despite being very basic, the execution is top-notch.
This job stinks. Literally.
But there's other really funny jokes in this episode that are really basic, yet still work because of the new spin they put on them. Like jokes about Plankton being short, SpongeBob making jokes about the tubes being inserted into him, and even this joke when Sandy is first introduced to Karen.
Oh, just plug it into that doohickey over there.
Just who are you calling a doohickey?
Wow-wee! Is that a real Mark III surplus wife-o-matic? She is beautiful.
Wow, I never even knew I wanted to know what type of computer Karen was. Also, it's revealed at the end that Sandy planned ahead for Plankton double-crossing them, which, honestly, I should have realized when she teamed up with him. Yet, somehow, I still didn't. And her plan, of course, is fucking genius. That's the best way to describe this episode. Comedically genius. It really is nothing but perfect chemistry.
Okay, we really have to work on your evil laugh.
Single cell anniversary. It's weird, but I never really thought romance was something post-movie SpongeBob would be able to pull off. But apparently, post-movie SpongeBob found a way to make a romance episode work. This episode is about Plankton forgetting his and Karen's anniversary, but finding out she got him the Krabby Patty secret formula. And since he forgot, she refuses to give it to him until he gets her a meaningful wedding anniversary gift. And after SpongeBob finds out, he helps Plankton out, and this results in Plankton giving Karen one of the best moments in all of post-movie SpongeBob.
Oh, my Karen. Oh, my Karen. Oh, my computer wife, Karen.
Yeah, it's no secret that I really like this song. It really feels like a genuine and compassionate love song, while still having its humorous moments. And the episode itself has some really amazing comedic lines. Like, for example, when SpongeBob hears Plankton panicking about what to get Karen, and him and Squidward have this exchange.
It sounds like despair.
That was probably me.
No, not bitterness, despair.
There's just something so charming about SpongeBob clarifying the difference between despair and bitterness. And even when Plankton is talking to SpongeBob about Karen, there's this really nice sense of love in Plankton's tone about her that only adds to this episode's enjoyability.
And there's the cutest mole on her CPU. And the way she processes data. Woo, mama.
Bottom line, it's an episode that really caught me off guard. It seemed like something that could have very easily been mediocre at best. But through clever writing, wonderful voice acting, and an amazing song, this episode became one of the best episodes post-movie SpongeBob has to offer.
That was so beautiful.
You really liked it?
I loved it.
Enchanted Tiki Dreams. Never in my life have I ever felt so faked out from an episode of SpongeBob. This episode, honest to God, seemed like it was going to be an annoying as fuck episode.
One extremely annoying shift later.
Ah, see what I mean? Even the episode itself wants you to think it's gonna be annoying. Not only that, it also seemed like it was gonna be a Squidward torture porn. This episode is about Squidward wanting to have a relaxing evening, and SpongeBob and Patrick keep ruining it for him. And it actually gets to the point where Squidward curls up on the floor and cries, wishing for a better world to live in. And when SpongeBob and Patrick notice this, they actually decide to give him that world.
I did.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, I was very skeptical myself. This whole episode, I was expecting some kind of fuck Squidward singer, and for SpongeBob and Patrick to somehow make Squidward worse like in all these other season 6 through 8 episodes. Hell, even Squidward expects it when he first sees what they do.
It's a mirage. I knew it. I guess this is it. Insanity.
Yeah, I don't blame you at all for being skeptical, Squidward. But really, it's so nice to see an episode where Squidward is actually allowed to relax and enjoy himself. This episode feels so much like an apology from the writers of these seasons for how they treated Squidward. So, they gave him a world filled with smoothies, magical waterfalls, peaceful sightings, boat rides, and...
Hit it, boys!
Welcome to Squidward's Tiki Land. Tiki.
One of the catchiest goddamn things I've ever heard. This is gonna be stuck in my head for a long time, but I'm not complaining.
You can relax all day.
Wow, even Coconut Fred gets a cameo and it doesn't ruin the episode. That's an achievement right there. Now I feel kinda bad that I left this off my honorable mention section of my SpongeBob songs list. Well, let's give it an honorable mention right now.
Hit it, boys!
Welcome to Squidward's Tiki Land. Tiki.
This song is catchy in one of the best ways possible. It's soothing, it's very peaceful, and it just makes you feel like you're on your own little vacation. Hell, Squidward even sings a little bit in this song.
Ordering from a coconut that's full of land.
And despite being off key, the amazing music keeps it from ruining the song. Consider this a top 15 song. It's one of the most soothing songs this show has ever come up with, and it really adds a lot of enjoyability to this episode.
Here in Squidward's Tiki Land.
Alright, back to the regular review. Another amazing thing about this episode is things do eventually go to shit. And when that happens, even I was left saying, "Aw, here it is, they're gonna steal Squidward's happy moment again." But SpongeBob and Patrick end up doing this for him. And no, for the record, this doesn't make it a SpongeBob and Patrick torture porn, because they're doing all of this voluntarily, and they're clearly just happy that Squidward is happy. And if this is an apology from the writers, let me be the first to say, apology heavily accepted, because this episode is enchanting.
I've never been this happy in my life!
Suction Cup Symphony. This episode, along with Sailor Mouth, is in my opinion one of the most underrated episodes of the show. Now, while I've never heard anyone say they hated this episode, I've never heard anyone consider it one of the best of seasons 6 through 8, let alone of the entire series. This episode is about Squidward writing an orchestra for a contest, and SpongeBob and Patrick offer to help.
Patrick, what are you doing here?
I don't know. I'm funny.
You're somewhat funny in this episode. Squidward ends up kicking the two of them out, and Patrick ends up breaking his ass as a result. And this ends up being an essential plot point because SpongeBob volunteers to give Patrick a health exam. Kind of a callback to Suds there, which I'm not complaining about. And this actually results in Patrick and SpongeBob messing with Squidward's orchestra.
Can't you two be quiet for one day? My composition is due tomorrow.
Oh no. No. My patient is very sick.
Hey, I broke my butt.
Now this is a really good way to work in the Squidward torture humor, because while Squidward does tell SpongeBob to keep it down and he blatantly refuses to do so, SpongeBob has a legitimate reason to refuse so because he's trying to help out Patrick. So it doesn't feel malicious at all on SpongeBob's part. And this also plays in really well to the second half of the episode, because after a few scenes that show SpongeBob and Patrick getting to Squidward while he's trying to write, he turns in his orchestra and it actually gets selected because of its uniqueness. And while Squidward's performing it, this ends up happening. Truth be told, I really didn't expect that to happen, and I laughed really hard when SpongeBob and Patrick appeared this randomly, not just because it was funny, but because this was an actual ingenious way of doing this. It makes sense, it fits the story, it gives us some great cartoony humor, And most of all, it actually ends up benefiting Squidward because the crowd loves SpongeBob and Patrick. This is one of the only times in this show's history that SpongeBob and Patrick's blunders play a big role in Squidward's happy ending. And there's just so many things to love about this episode. Not just the fact that it's one of the only episodes that makes Squidward get appreciation for something as important to him as music, or that it makes SpongeBob and Patrick's shenanigans work in Squidward's favor. It's also a fucking hilarious episode. For example, along with perfect chemistry, it's one of the only post-movie SpongeBob episodes to make a fart joke work.
Sounds like Squidward ate at Mario's last night.
But this one works in a different way because SpongeBob later proceeds to try and cover for Squidward when he thinks Squidward is just having bad gas.
Whoa! Sorry, fellas. This sure is a noisy trowel. Listen to this thing.
That's funny and kind of touching on SpongeBob's part. And the scenes with SpongeBob and Patrick causing mayhem at the orchestra is some of the funniest band-centered humor I've seen since Band Geeks. Yeah, I just compared a post-movie SpongeBob episode's humor to Band Geeks, and I do not regret doing so. Honestly, if I could only pick one word to sum up this entire episode, it'd be remarkable. It really is one of the best episodes of this entire series.
Just don't get a swelled head.
Well, this is a shocker. No, really, I'm actually kind of shocked by this, but there were 10 other episodes I was considering for this list that I'll rank 11 through 20. Well, I guess 20 good episodes through 3 whole seasons isn't all that impressive. Sometimes it's easy to forget that these seasons had almost as many good episodes as they did bad. They were hit or miss seasons, so I guess in a way, they were a bit better than I myself remember. But let's reveal the number 1, without a doubt, best episode from these 3 seasons. Sandcastles in the Sand. Yeah, remember that episode I referenced while talking about the Bad Guy Club for villains? It was this one. And I'm not gonna lie, I really did not want to put this episode at number 1. Not because I don't like it, but because it's too obvious of a choice. I was really conflicted between this, Suction Cup Symphony, or Enchanted Tiki Dreams, because I really wanted this list to not be entirely predictable. But the more I tried to justify it, the less possible it was. This is, without a doubt, one of the best episodes of SpongeBob ever. It's about SpongeBob and Patrick going to the beach and getting into a very creative, very epic, very entertaining war with sand sculptures. The creativity of this episode, the incredible writing in this episode, and the larger-than-life battle portrayed with something as basic, yet strangely as perfect, as sandcastles, is some of the most impressive stuff I've seen in this whole series.
I like you this much!
That was awesome!
But this is the biggest reason I'm putting it at number 1. Sandcastles in the Sand is the only episode of season 6 through 8 that managed to have all the best qualities of these 3 seasons. See, these seasons of SpongeBob had a very different style than the first 5 before it. The characters were written more asshole-ish, they liked using more gross-out jokes, and they seemed to focus more on getting their humor through creativity, not through clever writing with their characters. And this drastic change is a big reason a lot of these episodes failed. But the episodes that were actually good were good because they found ways to make these things work. When they did gross out humor, the ones it worked in were very subtle and didn't take you out of the episode. When they wrote the characters acting like assholes, they were at least able to make them doing so lead to something amazing. And when they got creative, the creativity that worked so well because they kept it unique, engaging, and very well thought out. Sandcastles in the Sand is the only episode that managed to show the true potential of these seasons. While it's a complete shame that these seasons never gave us more episodes that were truly amazing, this episode shows that there was a potential to these seasons. And who knows, maybe if we keep digging and peeling away the layers of some of these terrible choices, we'll find some more gems buried deep within these 3 seasons.
Bet I can clean up faster than you.
Oh, yeah, I bet you can.
Yes, I can.
No, I can.
Oh, I can. Oh.
And that ends my most requested video of all time. I hope this video was worth the wait, and I hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you all so much for watching, and if you're new here and you want to see more SpongeBob lists, I've got a few others on my channel. Thanks again to each and every one of you for all the support you've given me and for getting this channel to a 5-digit subscriber mark. You guys have been loyal and patient, and you make me enjoy this more and more each day. Thanks for all your support, and I'll see you in the next review.